Hi everyone, Dr. Hobgood here with a brief, I'll call this like a summary video where I hit some of the key ideas from the Johnson reading from this week. And so it might be really helpful to watch this video before you do your reading so you have a sense of maybe being able to easily navigate that chapter. Or you can listen to it and watch it after the reading to reinforce some of the key ideas. So in this video, we'll be exploring ethical decision-making for leaders and researchers, scholar practitioners, you who are in this EDD program. So one thing to remind ourselves is that ethical dilemmas are rarely ever simple. Many are going to involve competing values where there's no perfect solution. And so whether you're leading an organization or conducting research, ethics are going to shape how we navigate both uncertainty, and it's going to also shape how we navigate our impact on others or impact in the types of change we want to see in our organizations. There are three major ethical frameworks that Johnson kind of presents and reviews. Again, these are ethical frameworks or different ways of thinking about ethics that are really well known in the field of ethics. And so those three key ethical approaches are, we can see ethics as a duty-based approach, or from a duty-based approach, from a consequence-based approach, and from a virtues-based approach. So you're going to see Johnson identify those three different approaches. And these are just different ways about thinking about ethical leadership, and it's highly likely that you have used all of them before without even realizing it. Duty-based ethics says that certain actions are always right or wrong. Like, this is just the duty-based approach. Certain actions are always right or wrong, regardless of the consequence. Okay? So for example, in research, the IRB rules ensure that, the IRB has rules that ensures participant safety, even if they make data collection harder. So in leadership, this means that we might stick to ethical policies even when they're inconvenient. So in a duties-based approach, certain actions are always right or wrong, regardless of the consequence. You might imagine that you're a principal with a strict discipline policy. And say, for example, like a student breaks the rule, and while you think that the punishment is too harsh, the policy says you must enforce it. So duty-based ethics prioritizes following rules over personal judgment. But we also ask ourselves, is this always the best decision? So again, there are different ways and different approaches to ethics. We also have this teleological approach where consequence-based ethics asks, what decision will create the best overall outcome? So it's interested in the consequences. Instead of following rules really strictly, it prioritizes the results. Okay, so instead of following rules really strictly, it's going to prioritize the results. Leaders and researchers using this approach might make decisions based on impact, not just on process. So an example, a researcher is interviewing participants on a sensitive topic, but the scripted questions feel unnatural. A duty-based researcher would stick to the protocol because, again, they're interested in the rules. A consequences-based researcher might adjust their approach for more meaningful responses, even if it deviates slightly from the standard methods. The third approach it comes from this, looks at it through this idea of virtues, so virtue ethics. Virtue ethics is about leading with integrity. So we start to get into this character-based system. Instead of focusing on rules or outcomes, it asks, what would an ethical leader do in this situation? Which is a different question than what are the rules and what are the outcomes or results, right? What would an ethical leader do in this situation? This approach relies on personal character, honesty, and fairness to guide decision-making. One example is, let's say a nonprofit leader is offered a large donation, but only if they shift focus away from underserved communities. So we can see already the ethical dilemma. A virtue-based leader might refuse the money to protect their mission, even though it means financial hardship. Ethical leadership often requires standing firm in our values. And so part of what we're engaging in this week is really taking a look at and revisiting some of our personal values. One thing we can also do in some of this is, we have like this notion of ethics and our ethical decision-making as a leader, but you are also scholarly practitioners and you're going to be engaging in dissertation research. So one way here's some ways we can think about applying these frameworks to our scholar practitioner lens. So as researchers, we are always making, we also make ethical choices, both in how we design our dissertation study, how we execute it, how we follow up, how we talk about it later, how we present it to our population, our audience. So you might ask yourself, will you follow strict rules no matter what? Are you going to be very duty-based? Are you going to adapt methods for better results, meaning that you might be more consequence-based? Or are you going to prioritize fairness and integrity above all, virtue-based? Now, it's highly likely that hopefully you are a blend of all three of these frameworks. Usually we don't find ourselves only living in one framework, one silo, one container. But instead, as a scholar practitioner, we can use these three frameworks interchangeably, or we can use them very flexibly to ensure that we are engaging in ethical practices as a scholar practitioner. Ethical leadership also isn't just about your values. It's also about how our decisions affect others. And so we'll also talk about power and social responsibility in this week. So whether leading an organization or whether you're conducting research, you might also ask, who benefits? Who benefits from this work? Who benefits in this organization? Who benefits from some of these decisions? You might also ask yourself, who has power? Who is impacted by these decisions? This idea of also who is left out. So although we'll start fairly small, or we'll start our our reflection and our approach to this week's concepts really close, like our personal values, you'll see really quickly with the readings and some of our reflection questions that we'll also start to zoom out and think of the social responsibility. So I'll leave you with just a few reflection questions, some takeaways. As you reflect throughout this week, continue to think about which approach, maybe of these three approaches, duty-based, consequence-based, virtue-based, aligns most with your leadership style. There's no right or wrong way. There's no right or wrong here, even though I know we're talking about ethics. But again, this notion of where do you see yourself? If you could color them on a scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 100%, where do you see yourself kind of finding your home with some of those ethical frameworks? You might also think about maybe other colleagues that you have, leaders in your organizations. Can you see or interpret maybe from afar, what ethical framework they might fit their leadership style? And that could help create a little bit more empathetic understanding with you and some of your other leaders in your organizations if you also understand maybe some of their approach. So think, are you a rule follower, a big picture thinker, value-driven decision maker? And you can apply those questions to your organization. Where do you see these ethical tensions in your work? Whether your work in particular or dynamics with you and other leaders or stakeholders in your organization, or certain policies or programs that your organization has. And then also think, how will these ideas shape your dissertation ethics? So as a scholar practitioner, yes, you are, you've already been through the process of IRB, so you understand some of the ethics there. But there are also going to be a lot of decision-making that happens in the field, and considering both ethical considerations and decision-making within your organization as a leader, but then also with the added layer of a scholar practitioner. So I hope you enjoy the Johnson reading this week, and this gives you a brief little overview and or review of some of those topics.